It's 7:07. I'm Daedalus Howell. We have Annie Weaver. She's the publisher and editor in all things good behind VOZ, our local bilingual newspaper. Hello, Annie. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Yeah. Let's go way back in time. What was the inspiration to start this newspaper, which is, how long has it been around now?
Almost 15 years.
That's huge. I mean, you started a newspaper at the time that newspapers were beginning to crumble, right, as a media institution. And yet
right, but we had a market and we had a purpose. We had vision.
Yeah.
Not so much even a purpose, but it was a vision to bring the community together. Because when I started this newspaper back in the year 2000, all you could read in the English language daily, and I won't mention the name, was very negative things about the Latino community. Drug addicts, gang members, illegal aliens out to build California their last penny, lazy people. It was very negative, very bad. So what we knew was that that's certainly not the case. There are criminals and even gang members and miscreants in every socioeconomic group and every racial, ethnic group, every religion. Why single out one group and label them that way? So we wanted to have a positive publication that highlighted all the good people in the community, whether they were students doing well in school, because all the articles you saw were quote unquote dumb kids with white tutors standing over them because maybe they didn't know as much English as anybody else. So there are, look at Roseland University Prep. There are so many bright young people, so we did articles on them. We did articles on their parents who were working hard, either as farm laborers, domestic workers, physicians, lawyers, and it really caught on. And everything was equally in English and Spanish, so they used it in schools. And advertisers just flocked to us without our asking because they wanted to be a part of this movement to bring the community together.
Do you think the other media outlets had an agenda against the Latino community?
It seems like certain media outlets have the profit motive in mind, and what they thought would bring them more readers, i.e. more money, would be promoted on their pages. And sensationalism is, and putting people against each other is a way to sell newspapers. But since VOZ is free, we've never sold it. I mean, if you want to get a copy in the mail every month, you've got to pay the postage. But basically, if you're on the street, it's free, or if you go to school, it's there in your classroom. So we're not selling anything. And we really don't take advertising from blatant sales people. It's mainly social interest.
Yeah, and they come to you, it sounds like. They know your publication and they gravitate toward you.
Yeah, they just call us, and I handle all the sales, I handle all the accounting, I handle the bookkeeping, I handle the graphic design and the layout, and choosing the stories and getting the photographs. And would you
characterize it as a sort of labor of love?
Pretty much, because I don't see why anybody would want to stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning for a few nights in a row, 1 week out of the month, and spend 14 hours in front of the computer without getting up, except to go feed the dogs and maybe eat.
But is it a passion for you? Or is it obviously it's a mission, but has it remained a passion?
Well, social action is a huge passion for me. I was brought up in the Jewish religion, and social action is, especially for Reform Jews, social action is a really big deal. In fact, I know many of you who are watching this were listening to the Muhammad Ali funeral today, and I was listening to all the different religious traditions giving speeches, and the two rabbis that gave the most resounding speech totally filled the speech with social action, what Muhammad Ali did and said for the world, and exhort people to do that same thing. And that's pretty much where I'm coming from. I also have a marriage and family therapist license, which is somewhat of a social action. But I have absolutely no background in journalism. I never took a journalism class, ever.
And you know, rather pointedly, you're not even Latina.
No, but I'm the granddaughter
Yeah.
of immigrants. My grandmother came to the United States when she was 18 years old by herself on a boat from Russia.
Wow.
And she worked as a seamstress for her relatives enough to bring over some other people from Russia. She worked all of her life in New York City and then came out to California to help take care of me.
So you understood the legacy of the immigrant experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And most of us are immigrants. I had to give a speech in front of the Santa Rosa Chamber of Commerce when there were hundreds and hundreds of people back in 2001 or 2 at the Luther Burbank Center. And I began the speech by saying, well, all of you whose grandparents were not born in this country, stand up. And all of you whose parents were not born in this, stand up. And all of you who weren't born, stand up. And finally, or something like that. Finally, there was almost nobody there, a few Native Americans, who were actually here from the beginning.
Right.
So we're all immigrants, and we all should share the experience and congratulate these very exceptional people who left everything behind to come here to make a better life. It takes courage and intelligence to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's to be congratulated.
Absolutely. And you chose to do this bilingually, right, to make sure that, unlike other papers we had talked about previously, the same stories were being presented the same way, just in the language that one of two languages that the reader might prefer. Why is it that you think some papers that have come and gone would create two different editions and feature different stories for each readership, one in Spanish, one in English?
I just think it's the market, it's the dollar, it's the
perception of the market.
It's the perception of the market. And they think they know what people want. They think they know what advertisers want. They think, well, you know, just like the English Language Daily that I won't mention, they have their supplement every 3 or 4 months that gets thrown on the front yard that has a big thing, 2 languages in Spanish. You open it, the rest of it's in English, and everybody puts their ad in Spanish. So basically, here's this thing in English. So they probably called up all their advertisers and say, here, we got a great opportunity for you. We'll translate it for you into Spanish. We'll put it in there, and you can check out all these new customers. And you know, who's going to believe that?
Right. Yeah, it's patronizing.
And then it is, and then most of them have failed. They have their articles in English, even if it's in the same publication, and then they have different articles in Spanish. And it's not a unified, it doesn't make you feel like some you open it from the front, it's all in English, then you turn it around like this, and it's in Spanish. So Hispanic Latinos have to be backward and upside down. So
and they think that's a clever layout, when in fact it's segregated.
It's very demeaning.
Yeah.
It's really demeaning. So we want equality, we want humor, we want beauty. We want something that people can be proud of. And apparently that's so. I hired a new woman to clean my house a couple years ago. She's Latina, single parent, very wonderful person. And she was dumbfounded that I did this newspaper, this old Jewish woman doing this newspaper. And she said, but it's our newspaper. So
yeah.
that
means it worked. Yeah.
Yeah, it does work.
So let's come back to that in a second here. We're talking about Annie Weaver. She's the publisher and editor of VOZ, and you're watching 707. I'm Daedalus Howell. We're with Annie Weaver. She's the publisher and editor of VOZ, and this is kind of fun to talk about because, as you've identified yourself as the old Jewish lady publishing it. In our last segment, you talked about somebody you work with who's Latina and said, "This is her paper. This is our paper," right? That sense of accomplishment. Can we talk about that? Like, because you've had to cross over all kinds of perceived barriers in the community and created a voice, literally, for the community, one that you're part of.
And I don't even speak Spanish.
You don't even speak Spanish?
Un poco, poquito. Not really. I would be embarrassed to say anything in Spanish.
Wow.
I can read it better than I can speak it, but I don't need to. Another reason why we do the newspaper, I think it's really important for people living here in California in the United States to be able to be at least conversant in English. If you can't speak English, your job possibilities are so limited, and your possibilities for advancement and a more economically satisfying life are really limited. So the secret purpose of La VOZ is to help people with their language skills.
And that's a two-way street.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it is used in Spanish classes in Sonoma County schools.
That's great. And this anniversary issue you have here features,
Yes.
this is, as you mentioned, the first time that you put your own picture in the paper.
And with my dog.
And this is your, as you said, your coming out.
Yes.
When people learned that it was, quote, an old Jewish lady, unquote, producing this, was there any fallout or was there sort of surprise?
Well, you know, it's very interesting. A lot of people already know me. I haven't found that it is the tradition of the Latino community to write back their appreciation or lack of it.
Okay.
It just doesn't seem the same thing. We don't get the volume of letters to the editor that you see in the other papers. It's more of an acceptance, a heart kind of thing, and people read it. I met a young woman at Santa Rosa JC, and she found out that I was the editor, and she said, "Oh, I grew up with La VOZ."
Wow.
That made me feel a little old.
Well, so yeah, 15 years she'd be in her
15
early
years
20s,
she'd be.
teens.
And now there's a huge amount of leadership in the Latino community. When I started, there was nobody. There was kids throwing rocks at the police on Cinco de Mayo. And as a matter of fact, the very first Cinco de Mayo at Finley Park was organized by La VOZ.
Oh, wow.
A fellow named Derek Castillo managed the whole thing. He was on the board of the Hispanic Chamber. And we actually ran the very first one. In fact, I still have a giant vinyl banner in my garage
that's
saying
great.
Cinco de Mayo 2000 whatever.
Well, you've had this perception, this view rather, of perspective on the community at large. How have things changed over the last 15 years with La VOZ participating in the community?
The Latino community has become much more participatory. Now with Herman Hernandez and Los Cien, there are people running for office. There are people who are being politically active. Latino Democratic Club, Latino this, Latino that, trying to get measures passed that would be good for the public, trying to get Roseland refurbished so that it's not just a commercial center, trying to maintain. One thing La VOZ does is try to enable people to be proud of their heritage and their traditions while still participating in the community as a member of the community, which I think is really important. We shouldn't forget where we came from,
right,
and our traditions, and they're important. They help shape us.
There seems to be tension sometimes between the notions of multiculturalism and assimilation, right? How do you negotiate that kind of identity? Do you join the larger body politic that surrounds you, or do you maintain your own identity within that? How does that work?
Everybody has his or her own identity. When the subject concerns the entire community, like taxes to better something, or how our schools are better, or there's some general issue, you participate as a community member. If you're working on a job, you participate as the member of the community. And you develop the skills that you need to be a team player in those different venues. And when you're at home on Christmas or Hanukkah or some other Latino holiday, you can do the full regalia of your tradition.
Right.
And because no one still lives in Mexico, and that's not our country.
Right.
But it's not that we can't support.
And La VOZ speaks to the community at large, but through the lens of the Latino community. Is that a fair way to put it, or?
Let me just think about that. I think if you say through the lens of the Latino community, and when you point out successes in business, successes in school, person of the month, we feature Latinos just to let the larger community know that these people exist.
Right.
And after 15 years of doing it, it's become so much more acceptable. These people do exist, and they're to be recognized. So we use somebody at the English language newspaper whose name I won't mention, is like the Voldemort or something.
I know, right?
Said, oh, well, we're advocacy journalism. Well, you know, so what?
Right.
That's what they call it. There was a need.
Do you think they say that to diminish the paper?
Who knows? I don't know. I don't like diminishing anybody. Everybody's an A student
Right.
to me, and they need to live up to their greatest ideals.
Yeah. If you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
Well, I'm a master gardener. I would be working my garden.
I was thinking more like activism stuff.
I play the accordion in
Really?
the Love Choir. I've sung in the Santa Rosa Symphonic Chorus. My daughter and I go to the opera.
You're speaking like somebody who's on the eve of retirement. That's what that sounds like. Am I correct?
Well, yes. The problem is, whenever I talk about retirement, everybody talks about how much they love the newspaper. And then every single seminar I've ever gone to on aging says, if you're not contributing to society, if you're not giving back, if you're not volunteering, if you're not participating, you'll die. So, you know, here I'm doing this thing that participates, it gives back, and then I earn money.
Right.
I mean, my wonderful photographer, Jeff Canley, was a professional photographer for that newspaper whose name I won't mention, in the New York Times, for like 40 years.
Right.
So now he's working for me for free and living on his pension from the New York Times because he wants to contribute and he enjoys doing this. I'm just trying to think of some way where I can do not as much of it. As I said, I don't like staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning for a few days on end and just sitting in front of the computer.
Tell you what, in the next segment, let's talk about what that might look like for someone to come in and help you with this. We're talking with Annie Weaver. She's the publisher and editor of VOZ. We'll be right back. And we're back on 707 with Annie Weaver. She's the publisher and editor of VOZ, Northern California's foremost bilingual magazine. You have a colleague out in the world who also publishes Best Acoustics,
Yes.
right? Also a one-woman show, essentially.
My sister, we started at the same time.
Oh, wow.
She did hers and I did mine, and we were friends before we started.
That's great.
And we've been discussing retirement.
Wow. Those are, I mean, two really great voices and things
Yeah.
you guys do. It would be a loss if either vanished. Are you trying to vouchsafe that? Like, make sure that doesn't happen?
I'm wondering in what way I can back out of this, do a little bit less, and still have it continue. We have a huge Facebook and online presence where we post little mini newspapers a couple times a week, and we can get 10,000 readers
That's
reading
amazing.
them. And fortunately, this newspaper goes to the Latino community, the bilingual community, and organizations like the County of Sonoma, the County of Napa, the County of Marin, other businesses want to hire bilingual, bicultural, and biliterate people.
Right.
So they advertise with us. That money that they gives us gives me the opportunity to also put in the little announcements, the good community events that people should participate in, community meetings, and so
it's sort of
we
an
do
ecosystem that you've got.
Yeah, and we also put the newspaper online. It's quite an effort to produce a print newspaper, and it's expensive. You have, I mean, to lay out the 16-page thing on the computer, a lot of people have a lot of problems doing their 4-page newsletter for their nonprofit. And this is a 16-page paper, but I have the background in graphic design, so I can do this.
And you're so prolific online, and your social presences are sort of flourish so well. Have you considered just going completely online?
Yes, I've considered going completely online, except maybe for a quarterly bilingual magazine in the same format, or maybe every other month. I think I'm wondering the only people who might be able to take this over would be somebody who already publishes a newspaper,
Right.
like the Bohemian or somebody that has a big staff. For an organization like that to print a 16-page paper once a month and to do the graphic design. The ads come in by themselves. You don't have to do any selling at all.
Right.
And it's a little bookkeeping and a little layout. In fact, the articles come in. I always have more articles than I need. and you have a translator, I have a number of translators on board, be very, very simple for another publication to take this over, and then they have access to a different community.
Right.
And I know at one time I was in a conversation with that newspaper to possibly buy this, and the publisher of that newspaper said, well, they had no access to the Hispanic market, so they were interested in this, which is code.
Right.
It's code, and I know if I leave the reins to somebody else, it's going to change, but I wouldn't want it to be too commercial, just for the point of being commercial.
Yeah.
It's not. It has a heart. It doesn't have a wallet. It has a wallet because it's profitable. The universe has made it profitable every single month for 15 years because it wants it to continue.
But you're right. It's not. It doesn't. It's not merely market share. It's
It's not merely for the sake of advertisers, and there are some articles thrown in here and there just so that there's something there.
So if you could describe who or what organization you'd like to take on the reins, who would that be? And let's put it out there to the universe right now to see if maybe we get some bites.
Well, you need to have an organization that has the skills to do layout, the vision to do something positive for the community, the accounting and bookkeeping and managerial skills to get it all together.
The order's getting taller and taller.
Well, that's what I have to do, and I wear a lot of hats, and I have a very unusual skill set. Most people don't have this. I can toot my own horn in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been on this earth for many, many years. I already qualified for Social Security. And I've had many, many different careers, many honors, many this, many that, and I can do stuff.
Yeah.
And then I also don't need to support a family.
Right. So we're looking for a fairly extraordinary person.
Yeah, which I would be surprised if it exists.
What about the readership, though? Isn't there somebody in the readership? I mean, obviously you've changed hearts and minds, and people have grown up with this.
I just don't. And the OCD skills you have to fit all this stuff together, and to do this design, and it's very. People don't realize what it takes. You know, often when you see some beautiful work of art or some beautiful building, they don't realize the hours and hours and hours of training and schooling and pre-design and everything it took to come up with that. It looks so beautiful, it looks so simple. And like a ballerina,
right.
You know, the discipline.
Do you feel underappreciated, or do you feel like...
No.
Okay.
I don't look at life in terms of being appreciated or not. I know who I am.
But do you feel people recognize the amount of effort you put in?
Well, I was listening to Vesta's talk with you, and I noticed the only newspapers that she mentioned were herself, the Bohemian, and the Press Democrat. That's pretty much what I get from the Anglo community. There are a lot of people who are just in their own bubble, who have no idea of the huge diversity in our community, who have no idea. They've never seen this before, or if they have, they walk right by and they say, oh, I can't read that, it's in Spanish, because they see some Spanish. And I had somebody come to my office once, quite a few years ago, take one look at it, and he said, oh, I can't read this, it's in English.
That's ironic. How would you like to see Roseland develop in the next few years?
I'd like to have an increase of the economic activity so that the people there can make their living. I'd like to see it maintain its neighborhood quality. They already have the best schools in the county with Roseland University Prep at Roseland. So the kids are getting, and even the non-Roseland University Prep schools. So it's the balance between culture and assimilation. Obviously it's a cultural hub.
Right.
And let that keep going. And let the people be able to live there happily, and hopefully there'll be some affordable housing.
Right. And how do you see your publication fitting into that equation of the emerging Roseland?
It'll just keep going.
Yeah.
It just keeps going. I never know from one month to another what it's going to be. And I'm not beholden to anybody. I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
I can have, like we have poetry about animals. We have a page that sounds like either Dr. Seuss or Ogden Nash about some the history of the animal, the feeding pattern, the growth pattern, everything you need to know about, let's say, an elephant, and it's written in poetry so that the parent can read it to the child. They both can enjoy it. The parent can get a laugh out of it, and the child will know about elephants and their herds. I mean, I can do that.
And it's wonderful that you do, and I hope you continue doing this as long as you care to. So, thank you for being on the show, Annie Weaver, publisher and editor of VOZ. So, thanks. Hope you come back, huh?
Well, this was too short.
Yeah, it goes by fast.
We could talk for the rest of the afternoon, I'm sure.
Well, I can open a bottle of wine and we can just have a chat.